Silence. Your attention, please. The ceremony is about to begin. Is everybody in? Everybody in. The ceremony is about to begin. Silence. Your attention, please. The ceremony is about to begin. Is everybody in? Everybody in. The ceremony is about to begin.
you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself for the podcast?
Hi, I'm Bryan Tabuteau, and from Wellington, New Zealand, and I curate the Noise.Drone.Repeat sort of experimental drone and noise night in Wellington.
So right now we are in the alley behind Valhalla, where we just finished the Noise.Drone.Repeat night. Was this the 18th of October?
Something like that, yep. I think it's the 18th. It's probably the 19th by now, but yeah.
Actually, you're right. It is just the 19th. So I ran into a flyer for this gig as I was making my way through the city today, and I have heard of Noise.Drone.Repeat before. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But you know, the fact that I was in Wellington on a Thursday night and there was a drone slash noise slash experimental night going on. I mean, obviously I had to come, right?
Yeah.
What else was I going to do tonight?
Of course. Yeah.
How long have you been doing these shows?
So I think we started them early 2014 or late 2013, and this tonight was our 30th show. We try and go for try and put together in every 6 weeks or so, with a bit of a gap over Christmas, and just try and keep a regular thing going. Finding that the odd show here and there just wasn't creating enough of a cohesive scene, so we try and keep it as regular as possible.
What was the genesis? Why did you start the first one?
I've been sort of experimenting with noise myself for quite a while, but just not really out there at home. Never really thought that there was much of a scene in Wellington. I just didn't know about anything that was happening. And funnily enough, there were things happening, but it was very isolated and not really cohesive. But Merzbow happened to come along and play at Bodega in Wellington, and so went along, been a big fan for many years, and noticed that the the venue was full, and wondering where all these people were that like harsh noise and experimental music that I've never seen around, and I've never seen any shows. So we thought, hey, if we want to actually get out there and play in front of some people, just get some like-minded people together and put on a few small shows and see where it went from there. And yeah, we knew of a few people that were into it, and so the first show, had maybe sort of 10 people, everybody sort of interested in seeing how things were going to go. But yeah, just took off from there.
So it was a case of you not knowing whether or not there's a scene for this kind of music, but deciding that you would start the shows or start a regular series of shows regardless?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a decision that, hey, there actually are people out there that like this stuff. So, but regardless, it sort of felt like it was a good time to get people together and start a bit of a scene. And I mean, it seems a bit weird to say start a scene, but when we started, like the first few shows, people started, like the acts started integrating with each other and experimenting with each other and forming new things, and it did feel like that there was a lot of people that were suddenly meeting each other and going, hey, you like what we like, let's do something together. And I think we sort of felt it didn't matter if anybody came along to these shows, as long as we had an outlet through a massive PA that we could like shake things and sort of hit body cavity frequencies and sort of make people feel ill. Just it's the sort of thing that's difficult to do at home, but with a nice big PA and some people that appreciate that, it's good to do. And Ben, who runs Valhalla, he was real keen on having a regular night. I mean, he realised that, hush noise or experimental music isn't exactly a big draw card, and there's not a lot of, people don't rush into the bar and spend a lot of money. But Valhalla and the previous bars that ran in this place have always been about letting new bands and new things sort of try and gestate and see how things go, and he was all keen on giving us some regular nights and seeing how things went. So,
was Valhalla your first choice?
I would say yes, just because before we started this, I mean, this has been my home bar since we got to Wellington. It feels comfortable for me. So there are possibly better spaces for this style of music. I'm not sure There's definitely other venues that do noise and experimental music, and it's a completely different vibe to Valhalla. So, say Pyramid Club. I love going to shows at Pyramid Club and playing shows at Pyramid Club. But that's a much more comfortable, sedate. It's a small room. There's seats, and it's a nice place. Valhalla, you can go a bit more. You can go a bit darker and harsher and colder, and more sensory overload.
Valhalla is more or less a metal bar, right? So there is a certain crossover between metal and certain types of drone and experimental noise.
Yeah, I think so. This venue has had, over the years, it used to have regular hip-hop nights and regular drum and bass nights, but fundamentally it's kind of more on the hard rock to metal end. And the last few years, of course, there's a lot of international metal acts coming through, which is fantastic. And yeah, it's interesting, the noise scene pulling together a lot of different groups of people, because you have your sort of experimental ambient black metal musicians, and you have your just pure harsh noise power electronics guys that have nothing to do with metal whatsoever. You have your school of music, atonal jazz weirdness, and doing interesting controller experiments and things, and they all sort of converge onto a similar sound in some ways, but it pulls a whole heap of different people together. So I think definitely there's an element of metal that goes into this, but there's lots of other communities, even sort of the crust punk, noisy punk stuff that happens. You just push it a little bit further, and it turns into what we're hearing. Yeah.
I mean, even a lot of grindcore bands at one point or another kind of turn into noise.
Yeah, definitely. But it is interesting seeing a lot of different groups attack things with different perspectives and different reasons for what they're doing, different concepts, but all converging into the same area and appreciating the same area.
makes an act ambient? I don't know if there are actually good answers for this. But
Yeah, I don't know. It's everybody's taking bits of everything. I don't think anybody's really trying to fit into a particular box. It's definitely an experimental scene. So, but I mean, drone in my mind involves much slower changes, minimal things, probably a more emphasis on low frequencies and high frequencies. Noise can change depending on types of noise. You know, it's a harsh noise or whether you're noise wall or whatever. But noise is often a lot harsher and a lot more high frequency content and a lot more variations happening fast. Yeah, we occasionally have sort of dark ambient and ambient bands, and that's just mellow as and fantastic, especially with a good sound system. If you can crank it up, you can just sit back and basically go into a meditative state to a lot of the dark ambient that happens. Again, it's something really difficult to do in your own home, maybe with headphones, but there's just something physical about the frequencies shaking things in your body, and you just zone out to it. It's fantastic.
And a lot of the acts tend to be improv, right?
The vast majority of them, yeah. There's a lot of improvisation going on. I know the act that we do is completely improv. I mean, we know we've got a lot of equipment on stage, and we kind of know what sort of sounds we can get out of the equipment, but we're bouncing off each other during the set. Sort of, that's a great sound. I'm going to do this to complement it, or I'm going to let him run on that while I try some other frequencies here. And we plan out a few things, like some concepts, but certainly we don't plan what we're going to play. And I think a lot of people in this scene do that, and that's the fun thing about it. Some of the most structured ones here that I've seen have happened to be dark ambient ones, where a lot of the sources are field recordings that they've gone and structured and manipulated, and there's variation with the thing, but they have a clear progression throughout their music. And that is one thing that's hard to get with purely improvised noise, is to make sure you have a sense of progression and dynamics in your set, and it's not just half an hour of blasting at your ears, which is fun to sometimes, but yeah.
How would you characterize the act that headlined tonight? Because I wouldn't call him noisy or drony.
No, well, I would just say he's an experimental musician, and he has some elements of noise. He pushes it to the point where it is a bit of sensory overload. There's vocal elements, there's melodic elements, which is reasonably unusual. I'd say it's sort of 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 10 acts that play here have distinctive melodic elements.
I mean, he almost seems like somebody who could be, I don't want to say like a club DJ, but somebody playing like a chill out room somewhere. No.
Well, possibly. I've never been in a chill out room. Yeah, that's not really my scene, so I don't know what. Possibly. To me, like tonight specifically, he was channeling kind of a vibe that I get from a band like Coil, for instance. Specifically late era Coil, where there's some vocal elements, but there's a lot of drony dissonant things going along with very melodic pieces. But yeah, and even though he had an idea of where things were going and he had things that he was going to do, there's a lot of improvisation within that context.
Are there any acts that you wouldn't put on one of your nights?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess maybe a better question would be, how do you choose who plays on a Noise.Drone.Repeat night?
I generally try and keep a balance of I try and pick a couple of acts that have played before, not the last night, but have played before, to keep some type of continuity going, and then I try and find some new people that haven't played before and give them. I mean, one of the great things about Noise.Drone.Repeat is it's often the first time anybody's ever played outside of their bedroom. Like, these people that have been making experimental music in their bedrooms for years, and this is sort of an opportunity for them to play to people that actually appreciate that stuff. But I think the one thing that it depends on the night. Some nights are more beat oriented, some nights are more abstract, ambient or noisy. But we've had a couple of acts that tend to veer towards the 4/4 techno, and it might be sort of slightly harsher techno, and I find that kind of doesn't really work with our night. And so I just have to, in terms of acts, often it's somebody messages me and goes, "Hey, I'd really like to play," and they send me a link to their music, and I listen to it and go, "Yep, that sounds right. That doesn't sound too straightforward. They're not trying to play dance music. We're not a dance night, and they're doing something interesting with sound." And that's, to me, this night is all about experimenting with sonics and experimenting with sound and trying to hear things that you've never heard before, but in a very unstructured context.
What are the logistics of organizing these shows? Because I have to say the cover charge is extremely cheap, and as much as I'm enjoying Wellington and enjoyed my previous trip to Auckland, the the economics of getting around the city have been killing me. And so the fact that you're able to keep the costs to $5, which I don't even think you could get a meal for $5 here. How is this possible?
I have a good job. I have a good job that subsidizes this. So it was a decision when I first started this thing, was that as well as keeping it to a very cheap entry rate, and that's for a reason. It's like I want people to experience the stuff that I think is fantastic and mind-blowing, and a lot of people have never heard this stuff before, or don't know what it is, and if you make it $5, then people might be willing to take a chance. It's also a midweek gig, and a lot of people that aren't known. So I want to keep it low, and that generally covers the cost of a sound guy, and then I try and make sure that the bands get a little bit of funds each night as well, and that's just me putting away money each week, just to make sure that this thing happens, and that musicians feel appreciated, and people get the best chance to watch whatever music they want. When it comes down to it, I would happily pay to go to Australia to see one band, and I'd end up spending $1,000, right? And I can put on tons of shows for $1,000, and have fantastic nights, hear tons of new music, and give artists an opportunity to play this music to people that appreciate this stuff. And I just think that's a great opportunity, and a few bucks here and there isn't going to be a problem. I mean, if I was a student, that might be more of a problem.
Are you documenting any of these nights? Is there a live stream or recordings or?
It's something I'd love to do. We have individual recordings every now and then. If I've got the time to bring along all my gear, I'd love to have a regular recording, but I just don't tend to have the time to organise that. I take photos every night and try and get some photos up of every evening we do. But I do think it would be fantastic to have just up on Bandcamp for free. Here's the streams for the night, for every show. I think that would be fantastic. I just need to get a few more people involved to deal with that instead of trying to do it all myself.
Do you have a label attached to this show?
Not officially. There will be soon. This is a bit of a sore point. I'm trying to get a cassette release out of. I've got about 13 tracks from Noise.Drone.Repeat people. I'm trying to get sort of a first release out of, hey, here's a bunch of stuff from artists that have played over the last few years, and just trying to get it's all mastered and all ready to go, and I just need to get the design finished. And once that starts, then I guess that will be a label, and then we'll probably start releasing a few things here and there. But again, a label's a lot of work. I don't know if I've got the time, so if I was going to do that, I'd probably have to rope in a few other people.
I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a guy who has a YouTube channel called Pit Full of Shit, who shoots shows in St. Vitus and around New York City.
Yeah.
And he was just a guy with a camera who just started setting up his camera. And would talk to the venues, and the venues were cool with it. And if the bands were cool with it, he would just record it and put it on his YouTube channel. For people like me who are living in places where we're not going to get a lot of bands coming through, like it's a cool thing to like just see these videos.
Yeah.
And Noise. I never think of Noise as being, or even Drone as being like centered to a geographic location. It's always like some guy on his own, like doing it on his own, and it's more of an international community of people with these kind of outsider interests. So I think like a YouTube stream of some of these nights would, I think, very quickly turn Wellington into like the noise and drone capital of the world.
I think it would. I think it would be fantastic to do that. I just need to get my ass into gear. And in terms of noise, I mean, Melbourne is fantastic. Like there's a heap of shit going on in Melbourne, and we've had a bunch of people come over from Melbourne to play at our thing, and they're like, Melbourne is the shit. Melbourne, and a lot of those guys from Melbourne end up in Berlin, so it's sort of back and forth because there's this weird thing. But I'd love to do that. Really love to do that. I'm not really as much for a day job. I'm a software engineer, and I know a lot about tech stuff, but when it comes to YouTube and social media and things like that, I'm not too great on that.
let's talk about Wellington a little bit, because it's rare that you have a small city that would A, host, and B, actually have an underground scene like this thrive. How would you characterize the city?
So, I mean, I find Wellington, it's a very compact city with, you can walk across the CBD in an hour.
So for people outside New Zealand, CBD is the central business district.
Yeah. And it's fun, like, I guess we see ourselves as the sort of cultural capital of New Zealand, where there's arts and music on every night generally, great food, great coffee. It's just a very welcoming city in terms of the alternative scene. Basically, like when I've been living here 15 years, but walking up and down the main street, well, what I see the main street, Cuba Street, every morning to go to work, and just you end up meeting everybody on the street. You know everybody on the street. It's all these weirdos on the street, and it's all accepted, and it's all good. And the only time you ever come across any issues is when somebody from out of town drives through and yells weirdo at you. Yeah. So no, it's just a very open and accepting city, and I think that the music scene and culture here is fantastic. We are having a bit of a problem with music venues shutting down, but I think that's happening all over New Zealand. I think Auckland's even worse in terms of music venues shutting down. So,
is that an issue with economics, or is it from the government?
It's a combination. It's economics, but a lot of the venues that are shutting down are because of people are building big high-rise buildings, high-rise apartment buildings next to them, and then complaining about the noise, it's insane. I mean, it's not like they didn't know the venue was there, and all these apartments are getting sold on the prospect that, hey, nightlife and entertainment, and this is a great place to live. And they get there, and then they shut down the nightlife and the entertainment. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me.
That's a really good point. I remember, I forget who it was, but somebody made the point that a lot of people move to a city, and I'm more familiar with this happening in the States, so I'll say like Austin or Brooklyn or Berkeley, and there's a lot of like weird stuff, and it's very open to outsiders, and so you want to move there. And then once you get a little bit older and a little bit more successful, and you have kids, a lot of those elements are not as cute or interesting as it was when you first moved there when you were 22. And so these are the same people who moved here 10 years ago, and now they're trying to gentrify and water it down and make it less special than it was when they first moved there.
Yeah, and I mean that happens all around the world, obviously. But I think, Wellington's still pretty good. It's not as good as it was, I think. There certainly needs to be, and it depends on the governments as well. Obviously, a conservative government tends to shut down a lot of the arts and the music and not care about that stuff, and it's all about economics and it's all about making money. And then a slightly left government, or I guess centre-left government, is going to come in and go, hey, no, actually this is actually important to quality of life, and that arts is actually an important thing in society. Yeah, so currently we've got, I guess, a slightly centre-left government, probably extremely left from an American perspective, but
dude, I'm from Malaysia, like there's something fall on our spectrum.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think there's a little bit of a sense of relief when these sort of things, when the government changes and we go, hey, might be somebody that cares a little bit about the arts and venues and supporting music. And
I will say this about both Wellington and just New Zealand in general, is the people are incredibly friendly, to the point where I'm not somebody who's considered approachable or even desirable in Malaysia. It's certainly not friendly. That's neither here nor there. But tonight was a night where strangers who I'd never met before would come up to me and start talking to me. And in general, the guy with the beard and the napalm death hoodie doesn't get a lot of random strangers like coming up and approaching him. And the only reason why I bring that up is there were a few people at the venue tonight who I wouldn't describe as being Noise or Drone fans, and they just happened to stop in and check it out. And part of it was a price, maybe part of it is the location, but I think it also says something about the character of people in the city, where there's something new or that they don't understand, and rather than judging it or trying to shut it down, they're like, oh, let's go see what this is about, and they just kind of ended up here.
Yeah, no, I think that's good observation. We certainly get random people coming in and checking it out, and like, I mean, I know what we do is not what a lot of people like, and it's hard to understand until you know where it's coming from and what's happening. But yeah, we get random people in all the time. It's fantastic when I look out into a crowd and go, I don't know any of these people, which it's incredibly strange because a lot of the shows here, it's all the same people over and over and over. It's all the same scene. But whenever I do a Noise.Drone.Repeat, there's the odd people that I know from previous shows, and then there's always new people that I've never seen before. It's fantastic. You get to go and talk to them and go, hey, what are you here for, but what brought you here? What are you interested in? Yeah.
But I mean, as a promoter, that's something that should interest you, right? Like,
definitely.
Like, yeah. And I would say seeing flyers for a noise night, throughout the very commercial part of the city, but that's kind of astounding because a lot of the stuff tends to be word of mouth, very underground, very like social media driven.
Yeah, I find that interesting that you saw flyers. I mean, because
they're like posters. I guess there's more Valhalla than specifically this.
Yeah.
Night,
but okay. That possibly Valhalla lists of what's going on. Yeah. Because I was thinking I didn't do any flyers. So what we used to, when I was putting on shows previously, and this was more sort of the goth industrial scene, but putting on shows previously, we found that postering was very ineffective, and you'd end up spending a lot of money on posters for a couple of extra people. Yeah. So you just chuck in money away, and the vast majority of the promotion I do now is online, and I hate to say it, but Facebook, and I'd love to not use Facebook, but that is how my social scene and everybody I know in the city organises their social life. Like if we want to set up a dinner with some friends, or we want to go to a barbecue, or set up, it's a Facebook event and people get invited. Yeah. It's just the way people do it now. I'd love to move on to something else. But it does mean that I've sort of given up on postering. But that's mostly just costs a lot of money, takes a bit of time. I still try and make some nice images and things for the events and things. But yeah, if I can find somebody else that's interested in helping out, then would be doing that too.
I don't believe flyers are more cost effective than putting up posts on social media.
But it's interesting that you saw one.
Yeah, no,
that's fantastic. It's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, I can guarantee that I can vouch for the fact that at least one pasted on flyer got to a guy in a Napalm Death shirt who was just randomly wandering around Wellington.
Yeah, which is really good to know, and it certainly changes my opinion on doing that stuff.
Mister, you made yourself $5 tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that flyer cost though. one of the acts that played tonight was actually your own project.
Yep. UZB96. It's a very harsh noise project, and it's a duo, me and Martin Robinson, and we started it. He's a very big fan of Japanese noise, and we started it as a sort of, hey, let's see what we can do with let's stick a bunch of guitar pedals together, maybe chuck some contact microphones into them, and see what we get. And it's expanded a little bit from there, but still the concept is we try and keep as much analog as possible, just voltage in, voltage out, no computers, no limited synthesizers, occasionally some synths in there, and sort of tape machines. I mean, the name came about from the Russian number stations. What is it? I think it's UZB76. Sorry. Normally YZB76, I think people normally call it, which is the buzzer, and it was a Russian number station that made a buzzing noise every couple of seconds for like years, and then like one time every year or something it would stop, and then a Russian voice would reel off some numbers, and then it would go back to buzzing. And there was a lot of theories as to whether this was like a dead man's switch or something, and when it stopped, that somebody would launch some missiles, or it's just there's lots of different number stations around, and it's a fascinating not knowing what these things are. And some of the translations were UZB rather than YZB, so we were UZB, and changed it to 96 because our first gig we actually used recordings of the buzzer of YZB 76, but Martin was living on 96 Brooklyn Road, and he lived right next to a big electricity substation, and the noise from that thing after it had been raining, there was a massive hum at a particular frequency. It was amazing, and we took field recordings of that. And so we were using combinations of the buzzer field recordings and combinations of the electricity substation field recordings, all processed through the pedals. And so that's where the name came from. And it was just an attempt to try and do something really basic, really improv, get away from computers and instruments and anything that was structured, and just experiment with sound. So we haven't played much recently, but that's mostly because we don't get asked out much.
Luckily, you know a promoter.
Yeah, so I try not to play my own shows too much, which is why we haven't played a lot. But trying to put together some shows in Auckland to play with a few people up there that we've brought down before. I guess we're a bit more dynamic than when we started, but for me it's all about sensory overload. It's trying to push people's hearing and body. I mean, it's especially about running through a big PA system and rattling organs and trying to hit particular resonant frequencies in the body. It's a difficult thing to do when you've got a sound guy controlling it, but if they can let you do that, then you can give people sonic experiences. Like, I don't class it as music myself. Like, to me it's not music. Music to me requires a bit more either melody or structure or rhythm or something to do with that, but we hopefully have no melody, no structure, no rhythm, and it's all about just experiencing sound on a different level. Whether we get there or not is a different story, but that's what we're aiming for. And to me, not like I can't speak for Martin, but to me there's a ritual aspect to it, and when you get in the zone with those levels of music, it's good for manifesting certain things in your brain. It's good for trying to sort out various, I guess you can use it as a form of cognitive behavioral therapy or something, so manipulating your brain in the way that you want it. Yeah.
There was definitely a moment during your set where I felt the seat I was sitting on vibrate, and I realized that if we think of music as something that you hear, noise and drone and experimental music really does feel like something you need to experience and maybe literally have it resonate with you.
I definitely agree. I don't find that I listen to much noise at home, for instance. There's the odd thing, but like, so I'll really enjoy ambient at home, but harsh noise just does nothing for me unless it's through a massive PA and I'm experiencing it physically. And I think that's the place for it. Which makes it really difficult to go, hey, well, I'm going to do some recordings of this stuff, because you can record it as much as you like, but unless somebody's playing it massively and it's shaking things, you're not really getting the intended effect. Yeah. No, it's definitely something to experience, and that's what I like about the improv nature of it as well. Is like you experience it once, and that's it. It will never happen again. We did some recordings a few years back. I'm going to say recently, but it was ages back now. Up in there's some tunnels up in Wrights Hill in Wellington, which is like an old World War II gun emplacement. And so they had these big guns that shot out over Cook Strait during World War II. So they've still got all the old armoury up there in the tunnels and things. So we went up there into the tunnels and set up microphones down all the halls and in the different rooms, and then basically spent a couple of hours playing a noise set in one of the battery rooms. And just the environment just changed everything. The acoustics of that place, it changed your whole view on sort of sound for a couple of hours. And we recorded it and we're going to put it out, but the thing that people are going to hear on a record is nothing compared to actually being there. Yeah.
In addition to the noise and the improv nature, you guys also had some black and white films playing while you performed.
I think for the sort of stuff we do, I like a visual element of it. I think it adds to it. If people aren't really clicking with the sound, they might be clicking with the visuals, and then it all blends together. Visuals were a combination of our own recordings around the city. So there was a lot of stuff out Seaview and through the tunnels and out by the water, combined with a bunch of stuff from Pripyat in the Ukraine, Chernobyl and things. All run through a circuit bent analog video processor that I got at home, which was really, really fun. And then sort of a bit of grainy things chucked on as well. Yeah, I'd love to do more of that stuff. I was trying to go for the vibe of something we've actually played behind one of my other bands before, which is a fantastic film called Begotten. I can't pronounce the guy's name, but it's a fantastic film. There's no dialogue in the entire film. The soundtrack is basically crickets chirping and some low drones and the odd whacking noise. But it's just an absolutely visually stunning film.
In addition to UZV 96, you also have a few other projects, is that correct?
Yeah. So I've got sort of six projects that I'm working on at the moment. Not a lot of them are particularly active. The main thing that I've released the most of is a post-industrial metal act called Crash Can, which uses a lot of field recordings and things. I'm sort of, I guess, a producer in that band and play keyboards and samples and vocoder and things. I'm not the main songwriter, I guess, although the last album I wrote a lot of the lyrics, but I don't sing in that band. My main band that I write my own stuff is called Nullity, and that's kind of a industrial trip hop, slightly noisy alternative band. I play guitar and synths in that. My partner sings, and my sister-in-law plays bass. What else I've tried? Okay, I play synthesizers in a dark synth pop band called Radar Angel, which is lots of fun. I'm not particularly creative in that band, but I do live synths. And I play guitar and samples and synths and keyboard in a White Zombie and Rob Zombie covers band, which is a bit of fun. And I also have a solo project called EIED, which is sort of in gestational stage at the moment. I've had one live show, I've got another live show next year, and that is hopefully where most of my creative space is going soon. And that's, I guess you could say, hopefully, depends on what it turns into, but is a dark ambient, ritual, maybe folky thing with some electronics. It's kind of a lot of influences from, say, Coil and Current 93 and Scorn. Love Scorn. And there's a local band from Auckland, although they're not active anymore, that I get sort of, sorry, I can't even remember the name, very sort of harsh percussion. So yeah, a rhythmic thing with some melodic elements, but coming at it from a ritual perspective. There'll be vocals, not sure if I'll be doing them, but yeah. And that's sort of where a lot of my creative pursuits are going. Something a bit mellower and structured, and something that I can play at house parties and people won't be offended. Yeah.
So what's next for Noise.Drone.Repeat?
So we've got our last one for the year in about six weeks, and hopefully by then we will have the first sort of compilation release ready. We'll probably release that on cassette. For some reason people like cassette.
Don't get me started.
Terrible format, horrible format, but to be honest, I mean, I even buy things on cassette myself, and it's buying a physical object to support something. I don't even listen to them. I always get a high quality digital download with the cassette.
Yeah.
But it's nice having something physical, and you can make nice little cases and sort of fancy bags and things like that. Something, yeah. But I think that's what. Once we've got that going, then we'll probably. I've got a UZB release that might go out on that label, I guess, unless somebody else wants to release it, which would be fantastic. And then I'll be probably compiling a bunch of new stuff for another release, and then hopefully trying to get live recordings going.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's all good.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sweet. Cheers.